So I was just, this morning looking around for something completely different. And I don't know why or what I was doing, but I remembered out of the blue this movie that I used to like a lot with Uma Thurman. I'll put the pictures later. She was in this movie that came out in 2002, and it was called Hysterical Blindness. Okay. Um, it's not maybe one of the most popular movie, but I think it was on HBO. I used to have this movie in DVD form, and I remember even when I arrived in Barcelona, I still owned it. Actually, I don't have it anymore because when my whole narrative started and we had to leave that apartment where we were in the Raval, I think I had like my whole stack of DVDs in this little black container, and it was like inside of one of the cabinets, and when I left and I moved, I never remembered to look up there, so I don't have it anymore. And anyways, it doesn't matter because nobody uses DVDs. But so this movie, like even just rewatching it now after so many years, again, probably haven't seen this movie since ugh, 2000 and I don't even know, 2007, 2008. I probably haven't seen this movie. No, I'm no, impossible. I haven't seen this movie, maybe not 2007, because when everything started, at least like since before 2017, I haven't seen that movie. Okay. That would be like the last time that I maybe saw that movie or something like that. Um, and Yeah, and I don't know. So the point is, back to the point. When you watch this movie, right? The character who plays Deb, okay? Um she is, if I'm not mistaken, the one that's Uma Thurman, okay, just making sure I don't get the names mixed up. Um that is a perfect representation of how I felt, not only like when I went back to New York after I had my daughter, but how I felt, especially during my teen years. Now, Uma Thurman takes it to another level with the Limerance, okay? She takes it to another level. Like, watching her is like, you're like, oh my gosh, she's crashing out. It really makes you feel embarrassed for her. But there's something about that character and how she was with her friend. It reminds me so much of how it felt, I guess, when I was like 16 with my friends. That kind of feeling like you think everybody's watching you, like you're very self conscious, like you're kind of insecure. And then for me, especially, I did have a bit of an issue related to the limerence. There was actually a guy that I liked from the time I was 9 till about maybe like 16, or at least around that age. They used to live in my old neighborhood. And like he never liked me or anything like this. He was like 4 years older than me. It's interesting because now you know how the matrix works, but ironically, it's so crazy because when I got to junior high school and I was 13, it just so happens, mind you, I lived in a different neighborhood and everything, um, from the neighborhood where I was living when I went to junior high school. And it just so happens that one of the girls from that school where I was in the junior high school had a friend who just so happened to be the cousin of the guy that I liked all those years. It's very, now you know this freaking matrix. But at the time I was like, wow, that must mean we're meant to be. That's so ironic. That's so weird. Cause yeah, it is kind of weird because it was strange. Like I just told her what the guy's name was. His name was Edison. And I was like, yeah, like there's this guy, and she and she's like, oh, that's strange. I have a friend who has a cousin named like that. And that's the name that, a lot of guys are named like that, but it just so happens that it was his cousin. Ironic stuff there. But anyways, the point is that for many years during my teenage years, I had that kind of situation where um I was a chaser. So I would be the one to kind of like chase. And there are a lot of scenes in the movie where you see where Deb is trying to like, just like even with the guy from the bar that she meets, like he's showing her in every way that he doesn't like her, and she's still kind of like, and you know, I wasn't so bad as her, maybe, you know, but I feel like a lot of girls have been in that kind of situation, right? Where you are trying to make somebody like you to the point where you are devaluing yourself and chasing. And that whole sensation of being, again, very self conscious, that everybody knows everybody, right? And that kind of stagnant energy, because it's like, you know, these are the same people you grew up with, it's the same neighborhood, it's the same environment, nothing really changes. So I thank God so much. You know how I really broke out of that? Because you know, when you see a character like that, right? Today, everybody would be like, well, she just needs to go to therapy or something like that, right? Or I don't know. That's what I guess today would be like the typical response. Like, how do you recover from that kind of behavior? And like, you know, especially like how it ended with, you know, that scene in the bar at the end. Like, how do you recover from like everybody talking about you? And also another thing that she had in the movie that I was very um you know, that I also did a lot was I used to tell my business a lot to a lot of people. I might still be doing it now, but since you know how Simlandia works, everybody was already watching. Ha, jokes on me. But anyways, you know what I'm trying to say. I used to do that, which opens you up to also feel like you have to over explain things, like the character in the movie, right? She was like there at her job and telling them this and that, and then feeling, you know, she didn't want to feel stupid in the end when things weren't working out the way they should. When I was in that mode, you know how I kind of broke out of that, and this goes into something I was talking about this morning on a podcast. That, you know, when I turned about 16, 17, I broke out of that kind of like trying to chase guys by deciding that I was going to try being with girls. And then I began to like definitely identify myself as being bisexual, and then I had several like not relationship, but you know, like doing things with girls. But you know why I also felt safer with that is because I always knew that even though like I was doing stuff with girls, it was never going to be like a situation where you had to worry about like getting married or anything like this. It was just like, you know, you have a friend and you guys just like do stuff, and you can emotionally like, you know, how should I say, you know, support each other, right? But when it came to relationship with guys, I think like my whole thing was this kind of idea that I had in my head that I had to get married, I wanted to have kids, I always say like I thought that I was going to go to college and by like 22 I was going to be married and like, you know, have this perfect life after college. This was the kind of mindset that I had. And if you watch the movie, you notice like a lot, like I know it was in Jersey, and even though it's like more of like trying to show like a certain kind of demographic, like nationality, like Italian, blah, 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 but I mean, still, it's the same kind of New York kind of mentality for girls, I guess, from Queens, right? This kind of thing, like everything is like, you know, to get married and settle down. It wasn't until I actually moved to Spain and to Barcelona. And I still kind of chased a little bit, just a little bit after that, but it toned down a lot afterwards. But even when I was like 23 and I got to Spain, I let go a lot. I released a lot of that kind of insecurity. I just started feeling really comfortable in my skin and everything. So I don't know if it was like I said, that stagnant energy in America, in New York, that kind of also made me feel repressed like that, right? And obviously, like in like my solar plexus, just watching the movie, like was bringing back memories. I could just imagine the pain and that sensation of rejection, because I remember things like that, right? Like when you liked a guy and then he didn't like you, and then you don't feel you're pretty enough, and you don't feel like you're this, and even though you're smart, but you don't feel. I remember those feelings entirely. And when I was with girls, I didn't really feel like that because it was a different kind of scenario, right? I didn't feel like that. So when I got to Spain, I started going out clubbing, I started dancing, and I just started to feel like nobody's like, you know, I just felt free. It was just a weird feeling how I broke out of it. I'm gonna probably have to do a part two.